Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Harper. Welcome to Opposing Viewpoints, live radio for TV. We have an exciting half hour in store for you, and we want to make the most of our time, so let's get started. First, the question. Is U.S. military action against nations that support terrorism justified? And to help us discuss both sides of this issue, it's my pleasure to introduce my guest. Good friend of mine, New York Myke Shelby. And Myke's the host of Street Talk, KCBQ AM Talk Radio. He's a national civil rights leader and political activist in veterans issues and in the business. And I want to say, welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
And to a new friend that I just met, I'd like to welcome Dr. Abdeen. Dr. Omar Abdeen is the San Diego representative for the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Welcome, Dr. Abdeen.
Thank you.
All right. Now, once again, the topic on the table. Is U.S. military action against nations that support terrorism justified? So I'd like to begin with New York. Myke, no offense, Dr. Abdeen, I got to start with somebody, and I'm going to start with Myke. Can we win the war, Myke, on terrorism? Can we win the war on terrorism?
We have to win the war on terrorism. There's no ifs about it. There's no question about it. It's either we do or we aren't. We either stand for what the United States of America stands for. We either are the most powerful nation in the world and the world's really, I mean, I don't know how many democracies there are in this world, how many governments there are of, for, and by the people. I know you can argue that, there's government control here, there's less than a perfect democracy there, but the fact is there's no country in the world that gives its citizens more rights than the United States of America. If this isn't held up as an example to the entire world, an example of freedom for all to follow and emulate, then civilization's in deep trouble. I think we have to win, and I think we will win.
Okay, so when I asked you, can we win, you'd have to say yes.
Absolutely.
Now, Dr. Abdeen, I got to call you Omar. I can't be saying Myke and Dr. Abdeen.
Sounds good. Omar,
okay,
sounds
wonderful.
good.
I would like to ask you the same question because that's the crux of what we're talking about right now. Can we win the war on terrorism? Simple question, difficult answer.
The answer is yes, we can. The question is, how do we do it?
How? How do we?
War is not the mechanism to win this terrorism. By war, I mean battle, military battle. At times, it may be justified. At times, we may have the logistics to do it. And at times, the consequences may be perfect. But unfortunately, history tells us, and what we are seeing now, tell us that that's not the case. War, battle, seems to not necessarily be making us or allowing us to win this war. And we can go into more detail as we continue our discussion.
Good, because I look forward to doing that.
We need a more comprehensive plan to stop terrorism. I think everyone in this room agrees and condemns terrorism to the max. The question is, how can we win this war?
So what I'm hearing is that Myke is saying we must fight to win the war. Omar, you're saying we can win the war not with military actions. I need to take it back to you, Myke. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it'd be wonderful if we can win the war by just declaring that we've won the war. But I think we have to be, totally prepared to fight a war, battle after battle after battle, if that's what it takes. Let's hope, God forbid we should have to get into any kind of a war. I'm talking about Iraq, any place else. We do not want to be there, but we do not want to invite an attack on this nation ever again. Not that we invited the attack on September 11th, but more and more facts are uncovered that we almost did. It seems that, we have had intelligence and we have had knowledge that these kind of things were impending and probably are impending. And we have to do many things, not just one thing. We can't just be prepared to fight this on the battlegrounds. I think the doctor's correct that we have to be able to fight in every way. But primarily, we now have to rebuild our military that was decimated from 1992 right until the present. We have to rebuild it so that the world knows, especially the terrorist world and those who harbor terrorists, that they know that at any moment that we are attacked, that we can decimate any place that we feel we have to at any time. Not that we should, and not that we will if we don't have to, but that we can. Because that is what we must do, number one, rebuild our military might.
Okay, then I've got to ask this question. This begs the question, and I need to ask you first because then I would like Dr. Abdeen, who I now call Omar, to respond. Should we, in order to win the war on terrorism, physically attack first, and if so, who?
Oh, I think that, I have every confidence in the present administration to prepare to attack who they think may be, that nation or that group of people.
Not talking prepare, Mike.
No,
I'm
no,
talking
about,
should we
first
do
you have to
the
be
action?
prepared, Lynn, and we're not prepared right now. I don't think our military is right now prepared. I think if we have to, if our hand is forced, and we do, then we have to do what we have to do. But let's build our forces. Let's understand that we have to think about, the result first, where we have to be at the moment that we're again attacked, and we know that, let's say, it's Iraq or Iran or whatever a nation it is that is the staging ground for the next assault, or the people who are funding it. I mean, Saudi Arabia is not an innocent bystander in any of this goings on. So whatever that nation is, or wherever those people are, that we have to seek out and destroy, if that comes about, we have to be ready to do it. We're not ready today, not as ready as we should be.
Let's
and
say
we have
we're ready,
to achieve,
Myke.
We have to achieve that state of readiness.
Let's say we're ready.
Let's say we are.
Should we attack first? That's the question.
That's a good question. You know what, Lynn, if we know that that an attack on America is imminent, that we could prevent what happened on September 11th by attacking somebody, a preemptive strike against the nation who's doing that, or against a nation with nuclear capability and the ability to use it against us, who have every indication that they will be using it against us, I think a preemptive strike.
Okay, so basically, if you have to cut right down to the chase, is
you got
to
it.
be prepared and do it. Omar, I know you've got plenty to say. The mic is yours.
Well, I think, the first issue is there's no doubt, and I think the world knows, that our military is the strongest military in the world. Yes, it could be stronger, but right now, it is by far the strongest military in the world. The problem is that terrorism and terrorists are an elusive, evasive, and vague enemy. They circle the globe, they have support from various areas around the globe, and we simply, in actually fighting every single place that we find them, or think they're there, may not necessarily establish their presence, but even think they're there, if we attack every country and every nation, it will be a catastrophe. There will be thousands and thousands of innocent civilian deaths that have nothing to do with terrorism, that has already occurred, and the most disappointing thing about that is we still, by that mechanism alone, will not be able to root out the terrorists. And that is perhaps the most important message. Battle and military requires resources, billions of dollars, a lot of preparation, and most importantly, the sacrifice of American lives. And before we do that, we have to be sure that what we are doing is going to give us the consequence that we are shooting for. And I think that by sending the military into every place that we're suspicious of that may be supporting terrorism, we're going to kill thousands of innocent people, and we're not going to achieve the intended consequence that we set out to do.
We will be right back. I'm Lynn Harper. You are listening to Opposing Viewpoints, live radio for TV. Stay with us. And welcome back. I'm Lynn Harper. You're listening to Opposing Viewpoints, live radio for TV. Have a friend over here in New York, Myke. Have another new friend over here, Dr. Omar Abdeen, and we're talking about terrorism and should we employ military might, and also should we be the first to strike. Myke stated his opinion, which I would ask you briefly to restate. I'll ask Omar to do the same, and then you can go ahead and respond to what Omar said before the break.
Well, I think my opinion is that we should be prepared to do whatever is necessary, and if the minds that are in charge of this country today, and I think they're good ones, feel it's necessary for a preemptive strike, then that's the appropriate measure to take. I hope, as the doctor does, that we don't come to that.
Well, everybody hopes that.
I'd like to point out some things.
Well, let Omar state his opinion one more time for those who just tuned in, if you would, Omar.
Sure. I mean, I think that military battle alone is not going to win the war on terrorism. There are other facets to this war that have to be secured, that we have to be prepared for in order to win this war. And military action, battlefield, results in thousands of casualties of innocent people. Yes, terrorism results also in casualties of thousands of people, but two wrongs don't make a right. And we have to think of the consequences of military action and whether they actually will root out terrorism.
Okay, and Myke, you wanted to respond, so now's your chance.
I want to point out some things that the doctor said. If I can call you Omar, 'cause I think we're friendly here. We're not, we're not antagonists on this issue. I think we want the same result, and I think that's the key word here. Because when you spoke before, first you talked about the already occurred when you talked about thousands of innocent lives. Those innocent lives were American lives. Okay, they weren't the consequences of our actions, for instance, in Afghanistan, where we've had a few unfortunate, deaths of non-combatants and some friendlies. That's going to happen. You're absolutely right, but not thousands. The thousands were the consequences of a terrorist attack in the United States of America. You used the word already occurred, and I think you're concerned. You're overly concerned. I think you shouldn't be. I'm not, I'm just saying you're very, you're directed by this concern. Then you use the word the consequences of our action. It's the result of our action that we want. The positive is the positive result of ending terrorism against Americans. You call it the consequences. So I think that you have a shadow. You're a doctor, and God bless you for what you do, really. And you see the dark side all the time. I see the dark side, and I just wanted to get it away. And I see a result, and where you see a consequence. And I think that's what we're seeing here. That's the difference.
Okay, Omar, I'd love to hear your response.
Well, I think that's those are good statements. However, I come back to the point that terrorism is an elusive and evasive enemy. Who do we attack in particular? It's much different when your enemy is obvious, clear, and determined, and you identify that enemy in person or in location. Then you can strike, have a military strike, have a battle, and potentially win and end the problem there. The problem here is you attack point A, the terrorists come out of point B. You attack point B, the terrorists come out of point C. You attack point C, the terrorists come out of point D.
I think we get the point.
Where does this end? That's the first question. The second question, where do the other facets of this war come? You mentioned that we had intelligence. Unfortunately, we had intelligence failure. Yes, various branches of our intelligence had information, but they weren't able to integrate that information to actually prevent a significant attack. That came out later. We continue, I think, to have some laxes in our security. There was a rage about profiling Middle Easterners and Muslims and so forth, and we missed the point. We came to learn that terrorists come in different shapes, forms, and colors, and national origins. The message we sent out by trying to profile people was, well, dye your hair blonde and get rid of your accent, and you're done. You're home free. You can do whatever you want. No one's going to pick up on that. We have serious lapses. The best offense against the war of terrorism is defense. And we have to prepare ourselves defensively on our soil.
Well, let me jump in.
We have a point of difference here.
And that's fair enough. But
right.
I want to pick up on what Omar said about defense. A lot of people have been using for their political agendas things like close the borders, do a better job, they're sneaking in from Mexico. What do you think as far as people who are trying to obfuscate the real problem with their own political objections, Myke?
Well, sometimes the obfuscation isn't because of a political agenda. It's like the doctor just
Sometimes
said.
it is.
Yeah, but listen to what he just said. He just pointed to things like, he lumped the lack of intelligence, good intelligence, which I agree with, because we've had a disastrous, run for 8 years, right up until we've started to fix a problem now. But you lump that in with this, racial profiling against, you say against, people of Mideast descent, et cetera, and, dye your hair blonde. I think that's a subtle kind of an attack on what we are really trying to do. Any intelligent people in this country have been totally and without a doubt sensitive to being whatever we want to call it, discriminatory, against Arab Americans, people of color of any type, certainly Muslims, people with turbans or anything like that. We went from an initial shock response with some unfortunate consequences to say, wait a minute, we've got to be careful. Nonetheless, when we see somebody coming on the plane, those 19 terrorists were people, mostly men from the Middle East. Well, they were all men, but now we've seen other people. And so it's fair when we profile people. What's not fair is pulling over, a half a dozen, women, 85-year-old grandmothers to balance, some racial profiling, accusal, to say, hey, we're not doing racial. Here we pull over 10 white women too. That's inappropriate.
Well, Myke, hang on a second.
Let's call a spade is what I'm saying.
Hang on a second, though. I mean, if I were a terrorist, I would definitely try and get an 85-year-old white woman to carry a bomb for me. I just would, because I would think, gee whiz, if everybody's complaining about the fact that they're pulling over 85-year-old white women, who perfect to carry that through the checkpoint? But Omar, I'd like you to respond to that only because Myke's feeling is, gee, military might is about the only way we're going to make it. And also, Myke, let me point out, I applaud and respect your confidence in the government of today. Let me just say that not every living soul in the United States of America agrees with you. So my second question to you, Omar, is how do you feel about the current government? How much trust and faith do you have that they'll be able to get us through this?
Well, let me answer your first question first, and then I'll answer your second question.
Sure.
You know, I've traveled a lot, actually, since September 11. And to be honest with you, I have not felt completely safe. Let me tell you why. Because what's going on in I mean, I was pulled aside and you know, they searched me and so forth. I have no problem with that. In fact, I prefer that. But what I prefer even more is that every person on that plane be searched thoroughly. You know, I traveled to Turkey one time. And everyone on that, yes, it took 2 hours to get on the plane, but everyone was hand searched. Every bag, all the contents of every bag were laid out on the table and scrutinized. I got on that plane and I felt safe.
Okay.
Now, yes, it requires resources, but if we're going to pump billions of dollars into a war, we might as well pump those billions of dollars into security in our own borders.
And then that's the second question.
That's the first question.
Now my second
in
question.
response to the second question,
and basically, let me just restate it. What kind of confidence do you have in the current government? Myke has stated a very strong confidence. Do you feel the same way?
well, right now, after what we have seen since September 11, no, I don't in particular. I mean, there are certain aspects that I do, but many that I don't. You know, we sent the military to fight a war in Afghanistan. There were many civilian casualties. And then after months of a war, what do we hear? What do we hear? We hear that the Qaeda are regrouping. We hear that really we haven't made much progress in rooting out. So why did we spend all these billions of dollars for results that seem to be minimal?
I think they're phenomenal. I think the results are phenomenal.
This is amazing. Phenomenal on one hand,
I mean,
minimal
listen,
on the other.
we took the Al-Qaeda out of the control of Afghanistan, turned it on its head. Are they regrouping? Yeah, they're not going away. When Bush came out and made this initial statement, you know, right after September 11th, he said this is going to be a long war. This is not something to be done in a couple of months. And unfortunately, Americans want everything instantly, but it's not going to happen. It's going to be a long time.
No, but Myke, you have to respect the fact that you believe the way you believe. Omar believes that the results are minimal. I have to tell you, from what I know, seen, read, and heard, I'm squarely on this man's side.
Well,
I believe it's minimal as well.
I think it's phenomenal, and I got to tell both of you, if you're expecting quicker results, especially without any battlefield action, if we didn't go into Afghanistan the way we did, results would be a heck of a lot less than they are right now. I don't disagree with your, that you want more scrutiny, more, more whatever you want to call it, security, so-called, on these airplanes. But I think there's other ways of getting it. Although, your way, I'm not going to argue against it. I just think hopefully there's a better way than taking that kind of time. I would not like to see America in a bunker mentality totally, although if it's appropriate, it is. I think we should be declaring war now, so we are under war circumstances, because I don't want to give up the civil rights we've given up without a chance of getting them back. And I think there are things we have to do. I think we only differ in methods. And I bet you that you probably wouldn't differ with me in methods if we were attacked again on the same level as we were attacked on September 11th.
Well, Myke, the question is U.S. military action against nations that support terrorism justified? And you are an unqualified yes, it's justified. I don't hear an unqualified no from you, Omar.
Well, I mean, the problem with that question is there are a lot of things that are inherent in the word justified. First of all, have we proven that a particular nation is a supporter of terrorism or of particular terrorist acts? Intention alone does not justify spending billions of dollars putting people's lives at risk. We need proof. That's the first issue. Second issue, and in some cases there is proof, and in some cases there's a lot of suspicion but no proof. Take the anthrax issue, for example, which still is unresolved.
Oh, yeah.
But initially there was a lot of suspicion that Iraq was behind it. And within days after that suspicion became apparent, the tables turned. No, it's a domestic problem. And we see now there are some arrests and so forth. We don't really know. The scientists denied everything, so we don't really know what's going to come out of that. But that's just an example. And I don't really want to debate the anthrax issue per se, but that's an example. So that's the first issue. To justify something, you have to be confident, or at least as confident as you possibly can be, that what you are doing or the person or enemy you're targeting is in fact your enemy. So that's the first issue. The second issue is we have to study, it's not simply a moral question, because there are a lot of practicalities associated with war. There are people's lives at risk, both on the military side and on the country that's being attacked side. And are we going to put lives at risk? Is that justified? We have to be confident in what we're doing. We have to be confident of the consequences of what we do. And I think each case could be argued on a separate basis, but it's not entirely clear that we always have adequate justification.
And that's the key, justification. And unfortunately, we're out of time. We could spend hours. There's so much more that you want to say, and I'm sure there's so much more that you want to say. It's really difficult in this amount of time to boil it down, but the way I look at it is that you start to scratch the surface, and we'll continue this dialogue at a later time.
I think, Lynn, to sum it up, I think the only thing we're talking about here is the level of proof. And, I think the doctor would maybe require a stronger level of proof than I'd require, but I think we both agree that if it's proven that a nation has, helped to perpetrate an attack on the United States of America, that we should go to war against that nation. I think we agree on that, depending on the level of truth. I probably require less.
Well, the level of truth here is that we are indeed out of time. I want to make sure I have enough time to thank New York Mike Shelby for being here, and also Dr. Omar Abdeen. Thank you so much, Omar. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you,
Mike.
Thank you.
And just let you know, everybody, that you've been listening to Opposing Viewpoints, live radio for TV. I'm Lynn Harper. Bye-bye.